My brother made partner at 32, and my family treated it like a second coming. The dinner was at my parents' house in Plano, the one my mother had spent 3 weeks cleaning and restaging as if a magazine crew was coming, instead of 40 relatives who already knew where the good silverware was. Hidden. She'd had the carpets steam cleaned. She'd ordered a custom cake with gold lettering. She'd even replaced the photos in the downstairs hallway with a full tribute to my brother Daniel. His law school graduation portrait, his first firm headshot, a framed printout of the press release announcing his promotion. My photo wasn't anywhere in that hallway. It never had been. I drove down from Denton on a Friday evening after a 12-hour shift, still smelling faintly of flux and copper wire, my knuckles scraped from a tight conduit run in a commercial kitchen renovation. I was 29 years old and a licensed journeyman electrician with my own service van, a client list I'd spent 4 years building, and a small house on the east side of town that nobody in my family knew I'd been paying a mortgage on for the past 7 months. I'd learned early that in my family, information was a weapon. The less they knew, the less they could use. I changed in a gas station bathroom off the highway, traded my work boots for the nicest flats I owned, and told myself it would be 3 hours. Just 3 hours. My mother greeted me at the door with a smile that stopped exactly at her eyes. "Maya, you made it." The way she said it made it sound like a mild surprise, the same tone she used for whether she hadn't expected to cooperate. She looked at my flats, then at my hair, then past me at the driveway, as if checking whether I'd borrowed a better car. Inside, Daniel was already holding court near the kitchen island, still in his work clothes because he knew how good he looked in them. His fiancée stood beside him with the practiced smile of someone who had recently learned the family's unspoken rules. My father was refilling glasses and laughing too loud at his own jokes. My aunt and 2 cousins had arranged themselves in the living room in a way that suggested they'd been briefed on the seating order. I got myself a sparkling water and found a spot near the wall. Dinner was a performance I'd watched so many times I could have directed it myself. Daniel spoke about the firm. My father amplified every sentence. My mother circled the table refreshing dishes nobody needed refreshed, and making small editorial comments about Daniel's brilliance that were really just monologues in disguise. I ate the food, which was genuinely good, and answered questions about my work in the short, careful sentences I'd learned to use enough to seem present, not enough to invite commentary. Then my mother clapped her hands twice and said she had something special. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a tray of small wrapped boxes, one for each person at the table. "I wanted tonight to be about all of us," she announced, and I felt something go flat in my chest because I knew that wasn't true. This was about Daniel. Everything was about Daniel. The boxes were a prop. She handed them out. Daniel's was a custom watch, the kind with weight to it, and he held it up so the light caught the face, and everyone made the appropriate sounds. My father's was a new wallet, monogrammed. My aunt got a candle set. My cousins got gift cards. I opened mine last. Inside the wrapping was a toy plastic toolbox, the kind sold in the dollar aisle at craft stores, bright yellow with fake red tools that could fit in a child's palm. Nestled inside the little plastic tray was a folded note on my mother's good stationery. "For our little handywoman, keep doing what you love, honey. Someone has to fix things while the rest of us change the world." The table erupted. Not cruel laughter, which would have been easier to hold against them. The polite, delighted kind that people produce when they think they're participating in a gentle joke. My father chuckled and said, "At least we know who to call when the lights go out." Daniel smiled at his new watch. My aunt made a sympathetic face that she probably thought was supportive. I set the toy toolbox on the table in front of me, folded the note back along its original crease, and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I smiled the way I had learned to smile in that house from the outside in, starting with my mouth and going no further. What I didn't tell anyone at that table, I had spent that morning finalizing the permits for a commercial electrical contract worth more than my brother's monthly salary. I had a savings account that had crossed a number they would not have believed. And the house I owned had a second unit above the detached garage that I'd just finished rewiring myself, which I was about to list for rent. But the toy toolbox sat on the table, and everyone laughed, and I let them. Before I tell you what happened 8 months later and why I stood at my own front door at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night in July, holding that same plastic toolbox, tell me something first. What time is it where you are right now? And have you ever sat at a table full of people who love you in theory but cannot see you in practice? I want to know if this reaches you the same way, from wherever you're watching. My name is Maya Sorensen. I grew up in a house where love was conditional, and success had a very specific approved shape. My brother fit that shape. I never did. I'd gone to trade school instead of a 4-year university, which my mother treated as a personal embarrassment she was gracious enough not to discuss openly. My father's version of support was telling people at parties that I worked in construction with the careful vagueness of a man describing something he hadn't fully processed. Neither of them ever asked what I actually did: the diagnostics, the code compliance, the 3-phase systems, the emergency calls where a hospital or a restaurant or a cold storage facility was down and someone needed to think fast under pressure. They saw boots and a van. They saw the absence of a blazer. What they didn't see was the profit and loss spreadsheet I kept religiously, or the evenings I spent studying for my master electrician exam, or the morning I sat in a title company office and signed papers on a property I had paid for entirely with money I earned by showing up and knowing what I was doing. I hadn't planned to keep the house a secret forever. But after the dinner, after the toy toolbox, after the note folded with my mother's neat handwriting, I understood something I'd only suspected before. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to succeed less than Daniel, at a safe and comfortable distance, so the hierarchy could stay intact. An electrician who owned property and ran her own schedule was inconvenient. It disrupted the story they needed to tell about the family. So I stayed quiet. I worked. And I waited not for revenge. I want to be clear about that, but for the clarity that comes when you stop performing for people who aren't watching the right show. After the dinner, I drove back to Denton, with the toy toolbox on my passenger seat. I set it on the shelf above my workbench in the garage when I got home and didn't throw it away. My friend Priya asked me about it the first time she came over. She'd known me since community college, back when we were both figuring out what we actually wanted instead of what we were supposed to want. She looked at the yellow plastic thing with its little fake wrench and little fake screwdriver and said, "That's a weird decoration." "It's evidence," I said. She picked it up, turned it over, found the note still tucked inside. "Read it once, set it back down." "You keeping this?" I said yes. She looked at me for a moment. "Good. Because someday, they're going to act like they always believed in you, and you'll want to remember." Priya had been through her own version of this with her family, different texture, same structure. She was the first person who didn't make me feel like I was being dramatic for having feelings about it. She also never tried to fix it or tell me what to do. She just showed up, which is a rarer quality than most people admit. The months after the dinner were complicated the way healing is complicated, not dramatic, just slow and unglamorous. I worked 6 days a week through the fall. I finished rewiring the garage apartment and listed it at a rent that surprised even me when I researched the market. I got a tenant named Mr. Okafor, a retired science teacher who kept impeccable order, brought me tomatoes from his container garden, and waved at me every morning with the cheerful regularity of a man who had decided life was good and saw no reason to argue with that conclusion. I didn't talk to my family much. There were texts I answered in short sentences, a phone call from my mother on Thanksgiving that lasted 9 minutes and covered nothing real, a voicemail from my brother about whether I was coming to his engagement party that I didn't return for 3 days. When I did, I said I had a work conflict, which was partially true and partially a choice I made to protect my own quiet. My mother posted photos from the engagement party on social media with a caption about family and love and Daniel's wonderful future. I was not in any photo. I had not attended. But she tagged me anyway with a comment beneath one image, wishing Maya could have been here to celebrate with us. 12 people liked it. I screenshotted it without responding. I started keeping a folder, not obsessively, not out of spite, just the way I kept records at work. Permits, inspection logs, call notes. When something matters, you document it. I had the toy toolbox. I had the note. I had the Thanksgiving call recording I'd kept accidentally when my phone glitched. I had the tag. I had a string of texts from my mother that read, in aggregate, like a manual for managing a person you didn't fully respect. I wasn't building a case. I was just refusing to gaslight myself later. The real unraveling began in the spring, and I heard about it in pieces the way you hear about a car accident, first a mention, then a detail, then the full shape of it. Daniel's firm had merged with a larger regional group the previous year, and the merger had gone badly. Politics, billing disputes, a senior partner under investigation for something the family wouldn't specify. The new structure had started cutting positions, and my brother's role, heavy on client relations, light on billable hours, had been among the first casualties. He had been out of work for 6 weeks before anyone told me. 6 weeks in which my mother had been calling relatives to explain the situation as a temporary setback and a blessing in disguise, and during which Daniel had stopped making payments on the luxury apartment lease my parents had co-signed. My aunt, the only person in my family who seemed to believe that information should travel honestly, called me on a Sunday afternoon. She had a gentle way of delivering bad news. The kind where she started with how she was doing before moving to the thing she actually called to say. "I just want you to know what's happening," she said. "Because I think you should hear it before it becomes your problem." The apartment was 2 months behind. My parents' credit had been flagged. My mother had apparently borrowed money from someone in their church small group, which explained a comment she'd made in March about people who help family without being asked. Daniel was interviewing, but the legal market was tightening, and his confidence had taken a hit. He was covering with the same performance skills he'd learned growing up in our house. His fiancée had quietly moved her things to her sister's apartment. Nobody had announced anything, but the engagement had gotten very quiet. And still, in 6 weeks, not one of them had called to ask how I was doing. I thanked my aunt and sat with the information for a while before I knew what to feel about it. What I settled on wasn't satisfaction, which I'd been afraid of and half expected from myself. It was something closer to recognition. The architecture of their situation was built on the same principles that had always run our family: performance over substance, appearances over reserves, the assumption that the right title would protect you from consequences. What I understood now, that I hadn't fully understood before, was that they hadn't dismissed me because I was less capable. They had dismissed me because I was building the wrong kind of stability, the kind that doesn't photograph well, but holds up when the walls come in. In June, my mother called and asked if she and my father could come visit. Her voice had a careful new softness to it, the diplomatic register she used when she wanted something. I said I was busy. She said they just wanted to see my place. I told her I'd let her know when things settled down at work, and I meant it. I just also knew that things at work would remain appropriately unsettled for the foreseeable future. Then came July. If you're not from Texas, you might not fully understand what a serious heat event means in practical terms. It's not discomfort, it's a physiological emergency for anyone without reliable cooling. The summer had already been brutal, 3 consecutive weeks over 104 degrees. The kind of heat that buckles roads and shuts down outdoor work before noon. The power grid, which had not been significantly upgraded since I was in middle school, was running at full capacity and had been for days. On a Tuesday night in mid-July, the grid failed across a wide section of the metro. Not a rolling outage, a hard failure that the utility company was projecting would last 18 to 36 hours. I was at my house when it happened. I had a whole house generator I'd installed myself the previous fall, partly because power outages affected my work van charge, partly because I'd seen enough grid failures in my career to know the question was never if but when. My house hummed along. My window units ran. Mr. Okafor knocked on my door around 9 to ask if the generator covered his unit too, and when I told him yes, he put his hands together and said, "You are a very practical woman, Maya," which made me laugh more than he knew. I ate dinner. I returned 2 work emails. I checked the outage map and saw the extent of it large, covering most of the east side and stretching north toward the neighborhoods where my parents lived. At 10:47, my phone started. 11 calls in 14 minutes. My mother, my father, my brother, my mother again, a number I didn't recognize, that turned out to be my aunt's husband's phone, my father again. I stood in my kitchen watching the screen light up, and felt the specific stillness that comes when you've imagined a moment so many times that its arrival feels less like a surprise and more like a confirmation. Then the knocking started. Not timid, not uncertain. The full committed rhythm of people who had decided the door would open if they tried hard enough. I walked to the front window first, the one beside the entry, and moved the curtain with one finger. They were all there. My mother in a linen blouse, soaked through with sweat, her hair pushed back in a way that looked nothing like her social media self. My father, who I had never seen look uncertain about anything, standing slightly behind her with his arms at his sides. My brother beside them in a wrinkled t-shirt, no blazer, no performance, just the 32-year-old man behind the law school portrait, looking smaller than I remembered. And at the curb, my aunt's husband's car with two figures still inside, doors open, trying to catch whatever minimal breeze existed in a Texas night at 11 o'clock, with no power for miles. I don't know how long I stood at the window before I moved. The truth is, I had thought about this. Not the exact details, but the structure of it, the moment when the people who had decided I was the family's afterthought would need something that only I had. I had thought I would feel vindicated. I had thought I would feel powerful. What I actually felt was exhausted and sad and strangely calm, the way you feel at the end of a very long job, when the system finally comes back online and there's nothing left to do but document and leave. I went to the door. I did not open it fully. I unlocked the interior screen door and left the main door latched, so there was a layer of mesh between their voices and my living room. "What happened?" I said. My mother let out a breath that had been held too long. "The power. Maya, it's been 4 hours. The house is already over 95 degrees inside. Your father's blood pressure." She stopped herself. "Please, we just need one night." I looked at my father. He was staring at the porch light, the one running off my generator, with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not anger, not impatience. Just need, naked and unframed. "Why are you here?" I asked him specifically. He didn't answer right away. "Dad?" I kept my voice even. "Why did you come here?" He swallowed. "Because you have power. Because you planned ahead." He paused. "Because apparently you do that." There it was. Not because you're our daughter, and not because we love you, and not because we're sorry for the toy toolbox, and the hallway shrine, and the Thanksgiving call that was really about nothing. Because I had something they needed. The same calculus, just made visible by circumstance. I looked at my brother. "Did you know where I lived?" He looked at the ground. "You mentioned the street once, last year. When you were excited about..." He stopped. "When I was excited about buying my house," I said. He nodded, still looking down. I had let it slip once. Once, at a family dinner before the promotion celebration, when the news was so new and I was so proud I had forgotten for about 30 seconds who I was talking to. My brother had apparently filed it away, and here it was being used exactly as I'd feared information would be used, not maliciously, just practically, the way my family used everything. "How long have you known?" my mother asked quietly. "That you owned a house. How long have we not known?" "Since the fall," I said. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked at the porch, at the generator hum coming from the side of the house, at the window unit visible through the screen. "I didn't know you were doing this well, Maya." "I know you didn't." I reached into the pocket of my shorts and found what I'd put there out of habit that morning. I still carried the note sometimes, the same way you keep a stone in your pocket just to know it's there. I held the folded paper up against the screen so she could see her own handwriting. She went very still. "I've been carrying this for 8 months," I said. "Not to use it against you, just to remember what I actually came from. So I didn't talk myself out of knowing." My father started to say something. I could see the shape of a defense forming, the old reflex, and then the heat seemed to sit on him and the words dissolved. My brother spoke instead. Quietly, without the courtroom posture. "We were wrong," he said. "The dinner, the gift, all of it." I laughed, and I shouldn't have. That landed harder than I expected, coming from him. I let it sit between us for a moment. Then I said, "I'm not letting you in tonight." My mother's face broke open. "Maya, I'm not letting you in." I said again, still calm, still even. Not because I want you to suffer. Because you came here the same way you've always come to me. Because you need something, not because anything has changed. And I can't keep pretending those are the same thing. My father looked at me for the first time the way I had always wanted him to look at me, as if I were a person with complete thoughts and real reasons, not a simplification he hadn't bothered to finish. Then what do we do? He asked. Listen carefully, I said. Because I'm going to tell you once. I had pulled up the information before I came to the door. The community center on the north end of town, the one with the backup generator, which I knew because I'd been contracted to inspect it in April, was running as a cooling shelter. Intake was open until 1 in the morning. They had cots, cold water, and medical staff on call for heat emergencies. The drive was 11 minutes. I had already texted Priya when I saw the first missed call, and she had already called the shelter to give them a head count. That was the kind of friend she was. She hadn't asked if I wanted her to. She had just done it. I went to the hall closet and got the canvas tote. I kept stocked for emergencies, reusable water bottles I'd filled when the outage started, 2 cold packs from the freezer, a small first aid kit, and the folding fans I kept for outdoor job sites in summer heat. I set the tote outside the screen door. My mother looked at it, then at me. There's water, cold packs, and fans, I said. The shelter address is on the card inside. They're expecting all of you. I paused. Tell the people in the car. You're really not going to let us in, my brother said. Not accusatory. Just confirming. No. He nodded slowly, the way someone processes a verdict they had half expected. Then I reached back inside and picked up the yellow plastic toolbox from where I'd moved it to the entry table that morning. I'd been reorganizing the garage shelf and brought it in, a piece of accidental timing that felt, in the moment, like something more deliberate. I set it on top of the tote. My mother stared at it. The word fell out of her before she could shape it. Oh, I kept it, I said. I want you to keep it now. So you have the same thing I had, something to carry that tells the truth about how we got here, for when you're ready to have the honest conversation. My father picked up the tote. His hands were steadier than I expected. My brother reached for the toolbox with a carefulness he hadn't brought to anything else that night. The shelter, I said. Go now. It's hot and your father's blood pressure is already up. Maya. My mother's voice was barely above the hum of the generator. Is this what you wanted? All this time, was this? No, I said, before she could finish the question I had heard in my head 100 times. What I wanted was to not have to get here. What I wanted was for you to see me before it cost you something not to. She pressed her hand flat against the door screen. Not pushing, just contact, the way you touch glass when someone is on the other side of it. I didn't step back. For one moment, we stood there. My mother looking at me through a screen door in the middle of a July heat emergency, and me looking at her through 8 months of a note I'd carried in my pocket, like a small piece of evidence about who I had been to her and who I had made myself become anyway. Go, I said softly. Please. They went. Not cleanly. Not without my father. Muttering to himself on the walk back to the car. Not without my brother glancing back once from the driveway with an expression I couldn't fully read in the dark. My mother walked with the tote over her arm, and the plastic toolbox held to her chest, and she did not look back, which I think cost her more than anything else that night. I locked the door, walked to the kitchen, sat down on the floor with my back against the cabinet, and shook for a while, because that's what your body does. After you hold yourself steady through something it cost you to hold yourself through. Priya texted me at 11:48. They checked in. All of them. You okay? I texted back. I will be. She sent one word. Good. Then, after a pause, I'm proud of you. And then, cold brew and your couch has my name on it if you want company. I told her to come. The outage lasted 22 hours. The shelter stayed open through the following morning. My aunt called me the next day not to discuss what had happened, but to say thank you, and to tell me in the careful way she told true things that she thought I had done something hard and done it right. My mother texted me 4 days later. Not a long message. She said, I've been thinking about what you said. About seeing you before it cost us something. I didn't. I'm sorry I didn't. I read it 6 times before I answered. Then I typed. I know. I appreciate you saying it. I put the phone down and let it be imperfect and real, and the beginning of something I wasn't ready to name yet. Things moved slowly after that. The way things move when the real change isn't dramatic but structural. My father took a facilities management job through a contact of my aunt's husband. Practical work, predictable hours, the kind that doesn't perform well at dinner tables but pays consistently. He left me a voicemail in August that was half apology and half old habit, and then, at the end, unexpectedly plain. I didn't respect what you did, because I didn't understand it. I think I understand it more now. I listened to it twice and saved it. My brother didn't find another firm position. He found a compliance consulting role at a mid-size logistics company, which paid less and carried no prestige, and, from what my aunt said, seemed to be making him significantly happier. He sent me a message in September. Got my first paycheck from the new job. Made me think about the toolbox. Just wanted you to know I think about it. I didn't answer right away, but I did answer. My mother asked if we could have lunch. Just the two of us. Somewhere neutral. No extended family. No occasion. I said yes, but I made her wait 3 weeks. Because I needed to be ready, and not just reactive. We met at a diner in a part of town neither of us claimed. She arrived before me, and was sitting with both hands around a coffee mug. No performance, no prepared speech. I don't know how to fix this, she said, before I'd even taken my jacket off. I've been trying to figure out what to say, and I keep coming back to that. I don't know how, but I want to try. I sat down. Trying is different from knowing how, I said. Trying I can work with. She looked at me across the table for a long moment. When did you get so clear about things? I thought about a 12-hour shift in a commercial kitchen, and a shelf above a workbench in Denton, and a toy plastic toolbox I'd carried to the door on the right night. When I stopped waiting for you to tell me who I was, I said. She winced, just slightly, the way people do when the true thing lands. We sat there for 2 hours. We didn't solve anything. We didn't hug at the end. But when she left, she looked at me the way I had needed her to look at me, since I was old enough to know the difference, like a person she was still getting to know, rather than a category she had already closed. That, I thought, walking to my truck in the afternoon heat, was at least honest ground. Something could grow from honest ground. I drove home. Mr. Okafor was on his porch with a glass of sweet tea, and waved at me from the stairs the way he always did. I went inside. I stood in my kitchen for a moment in the quiet of my own house, the one I had paid for with my own work, and my own planning, and 4 years of showing up in the dark when things broke, and other people didn't know how to fix them. The toy toolbox wasn't on my shelf anymore. My mother had it now. But I didn't need it. I had built the thing it was supposed to mock. Late in the fall, I went out to the backyard one evening with a small fire bowl I kept for cool nights, and I burned the note. Not the toolbox that wasn't mine to burn, but the note on my mother's good stationery, with its careful, condescending handwriting. I burned that. I watched the paper curl and go dark, and break apart into flakes that rose and disappeared into the cooling air, and I felt the specific lightness of a person setting down something they had been carrying long enough to forget the weight was optional. There's something about trades that people who don't work in them don't fully understand. The work teaches you that most problems are solvable if you can see clearly what the problem actually is. Not what it looks like. Not what everyone says it is. What it actually is. You have to be willing to look past the symptom to the system. My family was a system. A system with bad wiring and overloaded circuits and a long history of deferred maintenance. It didn't fail because anyone was entirely evil. It failed because no one had been willing to look clearly at the load it was carrying versus the infrastructure beneath it. I'm not the one who fixed it. You can't fix a system from inside it when the system doesn't know it's broken. What I did was step out of it long enough to build a life that didn't require their approval to run, and then I let reality do the teaching that no amount of honest conversation had ever managed. My mother has a therapist now. My father has work he doesn't need to lie about. My brother has a job that doesn't ask him to perform certainty he doesn't feel. None of them are who I would have designed if I were building a family from scratch. But they are trying, in the unglamorous partial way that real change actually looks, and I have learned to hold space for that without confusing it for completion. A few weeks ago, I was finishing a rewired job at a restaurant downtown, the kind of full-day job where you're in the walls and under the floors, and don't come up for air until the system test runs clean. The owner came in around 5 to check on progress. She looked at the panel I'd rebuilt, at the labeled breakers, at the conduit runs, and she said, "You really know what you're doing, don't you?" "Yes," I said, "I do." I meant it about more than the wiring. Here's the thing about stories like mine, and I know there are people watching right now who are living some version of the same one. Everyone waits for the moment of vindication, like it's going to be the thing that finally makes you whole. The door in the storm. The phone call where they say you were right. The dinner, where they admit what they knew all along. But those moments are just receipts. The actual work happened in the years before. In the early mornings and the long shifts and the decisions to build something solid when you could have spent your energy performing for people who wouldn't have been satisfied anyway. The night my family came to my door, I did not let them in. I also did not let them collapse in the heat. I sent them somewhere safe, and I gave back the thing they had handed me, not as cruelty, but as clarity. "This is what you thought of me. Hold it for a while." Then I went inside and sat on the floor and shook, and texted my best friend, and had cold brew and company and a generator humming steady in the dark. And I understood that I had not gotten there because someone finally saw me. I had gotten there because I had refused to wait for that. So, I'll ask you what I asked myself the night I stood at the door with my hand on the deadbolt, the summer heat pressing against the windows, and the people who had decided I didn't matter standing on the other side of the screen. If you were in that hallway, would you have opened the door? Or would you have understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer the people who underestimated you is not forgiveness, not cruelty, but the simple truth that you built a life that runs just fine without their permission? That's not a revenge story. That's just what it looks like when someone finally stops paying for other people's comfort with their own.